life. That's great. Proverbs chapter 23. That's where we're at, right? Verse 17? 18?
We stopped.
You read 17.
I read 17? Okay. Well, we'll start with 17. I'll reread that and we'll pick up right where we left off and we'll get into 18. So Proverbs 23, verse 17. Let not thy heart envy sinners, and be thou in fear of the Lord all day long. For surely there is an end, and thine expectation shall not be cut off. Anyone here ever envy a sinner? Think about that for a moment. Envy a sinner. I mean, obviously, if God and His Holy Spirit thinks enough to tell us, do not let your heart envy a sinner, then there must be a circumstance where you would envy a sinner. So
there may be things that they do that brings us to a desire to participate.
Okay. So we're thinking like we see them doing something and think, boy, that might be fun. Mm-hmm. I might enjoy that behavior. We want to give it a name.
Sin.
Well, yeah, but I mean, what would that necessarily be something like? Okay, surely no one here is thinking, gee, I saw on the TV the other day where 6 people got shot. Boy, I wish I could do that. I know some people need killing. We're not thinking that to that extreme, right? No. But maybe, man, money's really running short this week. I really do not want to have to put that extra $50 in the plate. You know, if I wasn't going to church, you know, or how about this? You know, it seems like every time I get some extra money, the car is always breaking down. But that drunk that lives at the end of the street seems to always, nothing seems bad to happen to him.
Amen.
You see what I mean? So this envying of sinners sometimes can be the envy of, just like we sing in the song Farther Along. Mm-hmm. Never molested, though in the wrong. It seems like, man, nothing bad ever happened. I mean, I lost my job 12 times in the last 15 years. I can't seem to hold a job. I'm going to church all the time. But Frank at the end, I mean, he's got plenty of money. You know? So you get that envy going there. And notice why it says why not to. It says don't envy, but fear the Lord all the day long. For surely there is an end, and thine expectation shall not be cut off. You're looking forward to heaven, right? Or eventually catching a break. I said to somebody once, I said, you know, the devil can't be on everybody at the same time. So if the devil's on you, then you're giving someone else a break. And they said, that's great. I just want my turn to be over. I need a break, you know. So just remember, we have that end. We have that end game knowledge that we know no matter what we're suffering through, it's just that. It's going to be through. We're going to get over it, through it, around it. Okay? All right. Let's look on. Hear thou, my son, and be wise, and guide thine heart in the way. Be not among winebibbers, among riotous eaters of flesh. For the drunkard and the glutton shall come to poverty, and drowsiness shall clothe a man with rags. Yes, sir.
I hate to stop you.
No, go ahead.
On verse 17, my brain's tired, I guess. But are you talking about, like, if just say me and her was carrying on the conversation about the person down the street, that's wrong?
I wouldn't say it's wrong about carrying on the conversation. It's the tone. It's like it says, the heart. Don't let your heart envy what they're doing or what they're reaping as a reward. You might point it out, you know, that's one thing. You could point it out and point it out as a teachable moment. You know, I know they don't go to church, and I know they don't believe in God, and I know they got a big house and a boat, and they're always going places on vacation, but one day we will receive our reward and they'll receive theirs. And that's what we're holding on to. So if you're using it in a teachable way, yeah, that's fine. You don't want to gossip about people just to be gossiping about them. But if you're using it in a teachable way, I always say that the best way to do that is to take them out of it and say people like that. That helps keep some of the emotion out of it. I'm doing my best now to get back to Susie, Bill, and Tom instead of Miss Whittle, Wayne, and Gary, you know, and calling people's names. But it's important to remember that it's people like that, people who don't believe in God, who seem like they're getting everything they want, people like that, you know, that live down at the end of the street, so that it's not personal. Does that help?
Yeah.
A little bit? But yeah, you don't want it to be in your heart.
I got relatives like that.
Because when it's in your heart, that means you're really not talking about it, but you're kind of mulling it over in your own mind. And that's where envy and lust and desire, just like they're saying here in those next verses, when it says, again, in thy heart, hear thou my son and be wise and guide thy heart in the way, be not among wine bibbers and among riotous eaters of flesh. I got any rioters, eaters of flesh? Gluttons? We got any gluttons here? Anybody ever sat down to a family-sized bag of potato chips and you were a family of one? I mean, I'm not condemning us, but I'm just saying it's, you turn it over, it says servings per container and it says 8, and you eat them all. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's gluttony. That's what it is. That's gluttony. Now, maybe the serving was 16 potato chips, and that's a little unreasonable in my mind. But still, you know, gluttony is something you don't hear a lot about in the Baptist church. You don't hear a lot about it in a lot of Protestant churches. You don't hear a lot about gluttony. But gluttony was a big deal back then. Why would you think gluttony would be such a big deal back then? It should be now. But why then?
I think food was less abundant.
That's right. And it was wasteful.
Right.
Wasteful. For you to be a glutton means you also had to over prepare. And food didn't keep.
Well, that and because they didn't have, most of them people walked wherever they wanted to go.
Right.
They couldn't be in a condition where they couldn't waddle down the
Well,
road.
you know, again, I don't want to put it past, you know, what the average weight was, you know, in Jesus's day.
Yeah.
But obviously you could be a glutton. In this time period too, there was such a thing as, it was hedonistic kind of living. You would eat and drink until it all came up, and then you just clean up and go back to eating and drinking again. You didn't just do it like we do it. You know, you eat, and then go, oh man, if I eat another bite, I think I'm gonna bust. You know, and so you stop. There was a big group of people here that's, man, if I eat one more bite, I think I'm gonna pop. Well, let me eat 2 more bites. That way I can pop and then go back to eating. Because they were more into the satisfaction of the tasting than of the actual getting of nutrition. And so it was a fleshly thing. They were satisfying the flesh. And that whole thing about you need to eat to live, not live to eat, is the way that it goes. So many of us have substituted food for entertainment. You know what I mean? It's what are we going to do? I don't know. Well, let's go eat. You go on vacation. Vacation is just you eating in different places. That's all it is. You're just eating in a different town. So a lot of times that's what we do, and we're satisfying the flesh, and that's what we're being warned about here. As it starts out with, it says, guide thy heart in the way. So it's like, why are you eating? Are you eating because it's guilt eating? Are you eating your feelings? You got a lot of people eat their feelings. You get depressed, you get sad, you eat to try to make yourself feel better. This is what makes gluttony a sin, because the fact that you're having to rely on food and fleshly satisfaction to change your mood. What should you be relying on?
The Word.
The Word, that's right. On God, on His Spirit to pull you out. Okay? I could say shoes. Be the same thing. There's some people who are gluttons over shoes. Hunting equipment. Fishing equipment. I know some guys, man, they got 10, 12, 14 different rod and reels and 5 tackle boxes and all this. They're a glutton about that. Yeah, I'm sorry, fellas.
21 or 22 rod reels.
Yeah, 22 rod, got more rod and reels than you could ever need. 38. My goodness.
But they all got a purpose.
Sure, I'm sure they all got a purpose, but again, it's also that gluttony of the heart. All right, don't be a wine bibber, don't be a riotous eater. Look at 21. For the drunkard and the glutton shall come to poverty. I've known some people, they can't pay their bills because they overindulge in something else. Because they overindulge, they come up short. Okay? Or worse yet, a need would come up in the church and they can't help. Why? Well, because they had to buy a new this or a new that. And they're indulging to satisfy something within them. And drowsiness shall clothe a man with rags. That's that laziness, that's that slothful kind of attitude. So you could be a glutton and sleep too much. You could be a glutton and be too lazy. Because, you don't have to eat a lot and lay around and gain weight, So you just have to see it in that regard. Verse 22, hearken unto thy father that begat thee, and despise not thy mother when she is old. We're going to hear a lot about mom and dad here in these verses. Hearken and listen. Now, some of us have not had the best parents in the world. I understand that, okay? But realize this is being said with the understanding that the father or the mother are righteous people, okay? Please understand that. So you hearken unto your father that begat you. You do not despise your mother when she is old. Now, why is that there? Hearken unto your father and don't despise your mother. The hearkening unto your father is also the listening every time he calls you, and not despising your mother when she is old means she can't do for you anymore.
Right.
She's
You're
not
going to do for her.
right. And so you've got to hearken unto your father when he calls, and you've got to do for your mother when she can no longer do for herself. And you're not to despise that arrangement. Jesus would point this out later when he would talk about people who would say, oh, well, I've given this that I have to the church, and it belongs to the temple, so that they wouldn't have to give it to their parents when they were in need, and they were breaking an Old Testament law by doing that. But by giving it to the church, they could still use it while they were alive. You see, they were just trying to get out of having to give it and sell it so they could take care of their parents. You see what I mean? So it'd be like if you had a big house, and your parents fell into need, and you could sell that house, get a smaller house, and use the money to help them. But instead, you take your house and give it to the church and say, well, it belongs to the church now, and I'm just going to live in it till the day I die. That's you getting around having to do that. Now the church has got to take care of your mom and dad because you're broke. You see? And so here we're trying to make sure that we understand the wisdom there is to listen to your parents and take care of them when they're old, don't despise them. Verse 23 really is great. Buy the truth and sell it not, also wisdom, instruction, and understanding. Now, this ain't really talking about like college, okay? in the New Testament, Jesus says when a man goes out into a field and he finds a great treasure buried in that field, he sells everything he has to buy that field. Remember the story of the pearl of great price? When he finds a pearl of great price, he sells everything he has so that he can get hold of that pearl. Now, I'm not talking about you becoming a rich landowner, but we've got to realize that it's the truth and it's wisdom that we should be willing to sacrifice everything for it once we find it. And the truth in this New Testament world, in this gospel environment, is that Jesus Christ is Lord. And so once we have that, we don't need to sell it. We need to buy it and acquire it through sacrifice and through labor. But then we don't want to sell it, we want to give it away. You see? We want to give that truth away. But we have to value it. It has to have a value. Anything you find cheap is probably just that, cheap. Okay? Can you think of a knowledge that you can come about cheaply that's worth knowing? Like, here's one. Just sit right back and you hear a tale of a faithful trip that started from this tropic port aboard this tiny ship. You know what I'm singing? Mm-hmm. The mate and the what am I singing? Gilligan's Island. I know that whole song. It didn't cost me a dime. And it's useless. I even know that in the first season of the song, it was with Gilligan, the skipper to the millionaire and his wife, the movie star, and the rest. The first season, it was and the rest.
There's only one more.
No, there were two more.
Oh, was there?
The Professor and Mary Ann.
Oh, yeah, okay.
But they were and the rest the first season. Second season, they renegotiated their contract and they got mentioned. And then it became the Professor and Mary Ann. So they got their name in the song. Okay? Who cares? That is worthless unless I'm on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. You know, who were the rest on Gilligan's Island? That's not going to do me any good. It's useless information. And there are a lot of things that you gain that are knowledge that are just useless. And so you have to realize it's knowledge that's gained at a cost. That is worth keeping, and then it's also worth passing on. Don't sell it to anybody. Verse 24, the father of the righteous shall greatly rejoice, and he that begetteth a wise child shall have joy of him. Thy father and thy mother shall be glad, and she that bare thee shall rejoice. My son, give me thy heart, and let thine eyes observe my ways. So big emphasis here on the relationship between father, mother, and child. Okay? It's almost this instruction of a good reason for you to be a good kid is to bring joy to your parents. It should bring them joy. Your successes should bring them joy. As it says, the father of the righteous child shall have joy, will greatly rejoice. The mother and the father will be glad and will rejoice. So if that's the truth that way, what's not wrote there? What happens when you go the other way? Obviously, if you don't find wisdom and understanding, obviously, if you are not wise, then your parents are going to suffer. Anybody here suffered at their children's unwisdom, unwise ways? Yeah.
We all have.
We all have at one time or another. I think occasionally my dad still does over me sometimes. You know? But it's just important for us to understand that that relationship exists. And so it's also important for us to teach that. How could you teach that to your children? demonstrate your joy when they do something wise. You know, if the only time you ever talk to your children is when they're bad, then you've got a problem. There needs to be that positive reinforcement when they do excel. You know, and you got to watch it. It ain't like, oh, I see you made it up this morning. Not like that. not like that. Okay, not with the sarcasm.
I'm glad you paid the rent.
Yeah. I'm glad you paid your rent this month. No, don't do it that way. Genuine achievement needs to be recognized, and it needs to be applauded. And we were taught as good salespeople to compliment people, but not to compliment them on their possessions. Don't say, wow, this is a really nice house you have here, because even a drug dealer can have a nice house. You see? So compliment them on choices, compliment them on talent, compliment them on decisions. That's the way you do that, you see. And that's hard to do. It's very hard to pay a genuine compliment to somebody. One that doesn't seem weak or shallow, or invokes, okay, what do you want? Kind of an attitude. Okay? Any comments about that? Because again, it's rewarding a child for good behavior, punishing them for bad. Because remember, up in the upper verses, what did we read? Beat your children when they're bad. So don't just beat them, but also reward them with good feedback. All right, we're gonna take a little turn here because the language and the discussion is going to get a little harsher. Verse 27. We've just warned, my son, give me thine heart and let thy eyes observe my ways. For a whore is a deep ditch, and a strange woman is a narrow pit. She also lieth in wait as for prey, and increases the transgressors among men. Now, do not leave here thinking that there weren't evil men in those days as well. Okay? There were men who were sexually immoral at that time. And so remember, this is being written from a patriarchal point of view. You've got a male king who is trying to relate something to a male-dominated world. And God in his Holy Spirit is using something practical that everyone can relate to. Because in a quick summation of religious practices, Judaism was one of the first on the planet in that culture time that did not implore the use of temple prostitutes. Okay? Understand that that was a big thing in those days, because that's how the pagan people raised money in their churches. Whereas Judaism was based on the people just bringing of their best and their first fruits and making a sacrifice to God. The pagans had a very staunch habit of, oh, well, if you bring a gift, you get to go off with this priestess or that priestess. And so you've got that institution of prostitution, the world's oldest profession. Okay? They would also use it in their religious observances in the pagan temples. That would be part of it, that satisfying of the flesh and all that sort of stuff that goes with it. Well, it didn't take long before the priestesses would realize, hey, if I break out on my own, the pagan temple, the devil god, Baal and all them, they don't get the money. I get to keep the money. And so that's where this idea of the whore being a deep ditch and a strange woman a narrow pit is just trying to say, hey, you need to stay away from these things that are associated with these other pagan gods, and also with you not behaving yourself in a proper Jewish manner. Now, the thing that really gets me is we're getting this advice from whom? Solomon, who had 600 wives and concubines. Now, don't get the two confused. A temple prostitute or a whore, as it's being described here, or a strange woman is not a concubine. A concubine was a woman of a different religious belief that you wanted as a wife, but you couldn't marry because she had that different belief. She had not converted to Judaism. So because she was still worshiping her pagan god, he couldn't marry her, but a marriage relationship existed. Think common law, if that helps, that kind of a thing. So in all respects, they were married. He was taking care of her. She lived with him. They did all the other things that a wife did. They just didn't have that title because they couldn't be married under Jewish law. Okay? So again, it's more or less a direction about staying away from, I know this sounds strange, but staying away from the person that you have to pay for sex. Okay? That's kind of what's being pushed here. Because as it says, she lies in wait as for prey and increases the transgressors among men, lying in wait for prey. She's getting something from him. She's taking his money, his time, his influence. She's getting paid. So do you see the reason again? You've got gluttony, wine bibbing, staying away from these things that you're looking for to satisfy the flesh as opposed to relying on God and his Holy Spirit. Did I get through that okay without being too crude? Really trying not to be, but trying to make sure you understand why it's being written here and why it's more female said than male. Because really, it just doesn't work the other way. You can't have a bunch of male priests and women coming up to give them money. It doesn't work that way. Not in that society, and it really doesn't work that way in this society. I mean, I assume there are guys that do that, but the women far outnumber the men that do it. I mean, all you have to do is look at the number of adult clubs that are around that are dominated by women performers as opposed to men. It just doesn't happen that way. Right? Right. Okay, good. All right, so enough of that. Let's go on. 29 is a great list of questions. Want you to see if you can identify somebody who fits this description. Who hath woe? Who hath sorrow? Who hath contentions? Who hath babbling? Who hath wounds without cause? And who hath redness of eyes? Now, if you've read ahead, you know who I'm talking about. But if you haven't, who do you think fits that description? Think about it. Crying, troubles, problems, fights, can't understand what they're saying. Yeah, a drunk. Just a plain, simple, run-of-the-mill, everyday drunk. Now, in today's world, we contend with on a greater scale than they did then, but drugs would fall into this category too. They've always got problems. They're always on the verge of tears. They're always got fights and squabblings going on. They never got any peace. What'd you do to your arm? Man, I don't know. Why don't they know? They don't know because they were out of their head when it happened. Their eyes are red, whatever. They that tarry long at the wine, and they that go to seek mixed wine. Now, your mixed wine in this environment is literally too what I was talking about. Something other than just regular wine. Something that's had something added to it. Or they ingested something along with it. They had stuff they smoked, opiates, all that kind of stuff. All that was available to this culture. So we're talking about somebody who not only imbibes wine, but imbibes mixed wine, stuff mixed with it, whatever it would take for them to get their little woohoo buzz going. Verse 31 is very interesting in that it says, "Look not thou upon the wine when it is red, when it giveth his color in the cup, when it moveth itself aright." This is saying don't judge it based on how good it is or how bad it is. Wine is not something, and nothing else should be judged this way. Don't go, that tastes really good. Or, that's not very expensive. Or, that looks good. It just looks good, I see other people using it. Don't judge it by that. Judge it by, as it says, verse 32, "At the last it bites like a serpent and stingeth like an adder." You know what that is? Yeah, the pain that comes from it. Your bad stomach, your hangover, your empty pocketbook. There's a great little commercial that runs on television right now that shows a guy staring at a lottery sign about how big the lottery is. And he's got his bill in his hand, his electric bill.
Yeah, he dropped his phone.
And he drops his phone, and his phone breaks. And he's just got all these, and he's staring at that lottery sign. And then you see him walking in, but instead of buying a lottery ticket, he's trying to make payment on his electric bill. Okay? Same kind of premise if you think about it. Gambling could fall into this same kind of thing. It'd be great if I won all that money, and other people win it. You know what? I think I'm going to, just don't judge it. Don't judge the consequences that you experience and you see. When was the last time you ever won anything? Really, come on. You're not a winner. You're not a winner. I'm not, you're not, no one is. It's 1 out of 200 and something hundred billion people. I actually heard it said once, you've got just as big a chance of finding a winning ticket on the ground as you do of winning if you play.